Mike, we don't seem to be able to hear you.
Hello, Marion, can you hear me?
Ah, yes, we can hear you now, Mike. Great. There you are.
I, I am sorry, I had a little problem there with my phone.
Ah, that's
Um,
okay. Okay.
well, let me back up to here and say welcome to our year-end processing and happy holidays to everybody. So the topic today is talking about Dynamics FL year-end issues in general. The agenda is to talk about applying the year-end updates, which is an installation process, and then actual processing in Dynamics FL for accounts payable to include 1099s, project controller, and payroll for anyone doing W-2s. First off, you can obtain the year-end updates at this link. We will send you this slideshow, by the way, so that you don't necessarily have to worry about taking down what's on the screen. It'll include these links that you'll see in here as well. So you can log into Customer Source and download those updates at that link. And there's installation instructions included with it on how to install that. Some of our clients like to do it themselves. Others prefer us to do it for them. Let us know to help with installing those updates. So the updates include current year reports, year-end type issues that have been changed, magnetic media changes, and 1099 changes. So the year-end updates will be available for these versions. So if you have SL 2011 Service Pack 1 or SL 2011 with no Service Pack, you would need to upgrade to one of the versions on the screen in order to get this up, be able to install this update. If anyone is on an earlier version of that and needs assistance, please let us know. That's something that needs to be addressed immediately so that it can be done in time if that is the case. Year-end updates include applying the year-end updates, but you should do that after you have closed the payroll for the year. If you're doing payroll, the update should be installed after you've closed payroll for the year. There's also a separate tax table update that should come out around the same time. The year-end updates are due out the week of December 21st, so sometime just before Christmas they would be available. The tax table updates are typically released somewhere towards the end of December, early January. They might bring them out at the same time as they do the year-end update. So you can look for those after the 21st. Okay, of course, tax return is done on a calendar year basis, regardless of whether you're on a fiscal year or not. And don't forget that by changing your security settings, whatnot, setups in General Ledger, you can post entries to prior periods if you need to in order to assist in your reconciliation process. You must have security enabled to allow that posting, of course. And W-2s are updated based on the check date as well as 1099s. Just some dates to remember here. So this year, the last day of January falls on a Sunday, so all the W-2s and 1099s have to be out by February 1st, postmarked by February 1st. Then the paper format that you would send to the IRS is February 29th, and the W-2 to Social Security also February 29th. And then if you're doing e-file for W-2s and 1099s, then you can do that on by March 31st. Okay. First, we're going to look at accounts payable and 1099 processing. So first, I wanted to see if any messages in the chat here. Don't see anything. Okay, let's move on into accounts payable. Okay, so the standard closing process for accounts payable. So you would review, of course, all your open accounts payable, print your batch register, look at the statuses, make sure that you don't have any batches out there in an H hold, B release later, or an S, a suspended batch. You shouldn't have any of those, but check to make sure by looking at your batch register at the statuses of the batches. Then, of course, make sure you post everything to the general ledger. You may have it set to automatically post or not. Just make sure everything gets posted. Of course, do your vendor period trial balance and tie that to the general ledger control accounts. Confirm, that any recurring entries have been generated. Print a check register, aged accounts payable, and then you close the year. Now, the closing, of course, occurs in the general ledger in the closing screen. And then you would also usually close the 1099 calendar year control. But we're going to, there's going to be a few more comments on the calendar year control, so stand by. So if you find in your reconciliation that there's any problems with the amounts, they can be manually updated in initialize mode. So most of security is set up for users without access to the initialize mode. But in the security section, either by user or by group, a user needs to be granted initialize mode in order to adjust the 1099 amounts. Oftentimes that's done on a temporary basis just while during the period of time that you're working on your 1099s. The amounts are calculated based on the check date. Now the AP integrity check. So in the AP integrity check, there's an option to rebuild the 1099 amounts. Those 1099 amounts will be calculated based on the data that's been entered, meaning that for something to show up in that or be utilized in that recalculation, it would have to be flagged, the vendor would have to be flagged as a 1099 vendor, and the transaction would have had to have been entered with a box number in it, usually box 7. So if you have a situation where you had a vendor that, the first half of the year was treated as an ordinary vendor, and the second half of the year you realized that this vendor needed to be subject to 1099, and checked off that box and started putting in the box numbers on those transactions for the second half of the year, the integrity check would not pick up what happened in the first half of the year. So once again, you'd have to use the initialize mode to update those amounts to include, by looking at the vendor information, those amounts from the beginning of the year, and add them to what the system calculated for the second half of the year. So I hope that all made sense. If there's any questions, please let us know. But just know that when you change these numbers, you're changing them outside of the normal calculation. Do make sure that you have a good backup of the system before you start changing those amounts if you need to. Now, next is the 1099 preview, which is a report. It's not a form. It's a report. It will show all vendors that are subject to 1099, whether they have an amount in them or not. So that's all inclusive, so that you can use that for reconciliation purposes and whatnot. The 1099 forms will only print those 1099s that hit the 1099 limit that you set in the setup, usually $600. So first reconcile, then do the forms. You can print the forms as many times as you need to. Certainly you can print a set on white paper, and you'll have to have, of course, the 1099 forms to use with that. A little bit later, there's a link in here on where you can get those forms. Okay, 1099 information is updated throughout the year, so there's no process that you have to run unless you would choose to recalculate it. You only need to run a process if you're generating magnetic media. Okay, accounts payable, you can go to reports and click 1099 forms report. Also preview it there. And once again, it shows all 1099 vendors regardless of limit in the preview. Now, getting back to the 1099 year control. So the way Dynamics FL works, you can have 2 years open for 1099 purposes at any point in time. So usually you would look at your 1099 year, and there'll be a screenshot here in a minute, but in your 1099 year control, it'll tell you the current year and the next year. You can report on either of those. But make sure that you're careful about closing the 1099 year. If you accidentally do it too many times, you end up with a situation where you can't post anything, and we might have to fix something. So when you're printing the reports, notice that on the Options tab, there's a checkbox to say that you want to print the next 1099 year. If you don't check it, it's going to print the current 1099 year. So here's a screenshot of what that screen looks like. In this example, the current year is 2012, the next year is 2013. What you're going to have to do is also make sure that you have a 1099 year open for 2016. If you don't, the first time when you try to run checks, it's going to come up with a warning that you don't have an open, you're not in an open, you're not printing a check in an open 1099 year, and directs you to come back and do this anyway. So typically you would leave the current year open for this year and the next year for next year, just like it says, until you've completed your 1099s, and after which you would close the current year and then it would shift forward a year. Hope that made sense. If not, please let me know. Okay, 1099 edits. So if you need to edit, you go into initialize mode, and you need access rights for that. Looking at this screen, you see the box numbers for 2013 and 2014 there are black, meaning they're not grayed out, meaning they're editable. And that's because the user is in initialize mode, but that's possible. So what you would see in here is what's been calculated by the system for the boxes and for those years. And then, of course, you need to those are the numbers that will show up on the 1099 preview report, and you need to reconcile that. If you find a difference, then you would edit the numbers in this screen. The process for doing electronic filing of 1099s, the same sort of thing you can generate for either of the two open years, so that applies to the open 1099 years as well. Just another view of that. So when you go to do the generate, what you see in this screen is going to be defaulting from the company information that's in the company information screen in the administrative section. But you can change it here. So if it needs to be different in some way, you can just change it right here, and that's what we'll print on the reports, the forms as well. Common issues, you might see a system message 532, and that would be that calendar year control issue. If 1099 balances are incorrect for a vendor, use the integrity check and manually change those. If the current 1099 year was purged by mistake, we would have to run a SQL script to update the periods in year. That's not a big deal. It just takes a few minutes to run. But if you find yourself in that situation, please reach out to us and let us know so that can be taken care of. Okay, next subject is project controller, but I was wondering if there were any questions out there. Marion, I'm not seeing anything in the chat window in the way of questions.
No, neither do I right now. Mike?
What's that?
I don't see any either.
Okay, good enough. I'll move along to the project controller. Okay, so want to take a look at the year-end steps that need to be performed for project controller. First, obviously, make sure all data has been entered for the current period. Make sure all other modules have been closed for the current period in the GL closing. Before you close the projects, make sure you review all time cards and make sure that all of them, you don't have any time cards out there in an unprocessed status. You want to make sure that you do the labor commitment load, the GL labor posting, and the pay labor interface. If you're either sending that information to Dynamics SL Payroll or if it's going to an outside organization through the pay labor interface. Review the expense reports, same as time cards. Make sure you don't have any unprocessed expense reports out there. Run the financial transaction transfer. I expect most folks have the FTT turned on to run automatically, but before you close the project, make sure you run it manually as part of your closing process. Complete revenue recognition and allocation processes. Do your billings transaction load. Complete all your invoicing, and then close the period. So, of course, the project controller is the one module that is closed in project controller as opposed to being controlled in the general ledger. So it's an independent close process that you would run. You should be closing project controller at the end of each fiscal period. And then when you go to run the closing for the last period of the year, the 12th period, it will automatically switch to say you're closing the year. Important to do that because most projects are marked as balance forward, and that's what sets up the buckets for the following year. So make sure you get that year close done. Screen performs a set of tests, right? It's going to allow out and look and see that all submodules have been posted, like AP, AR, etc. Making sure that the accounting periods are closed. project charge batches are posted, and closing will be blocked if any exception is identified, right? And it will note that to you in a screen. As you run it, it puts it in the note information there. And time cards that have not been reviewed, warning message will appear, but it will let you go forward with that. So this is the closing screen in Project Controller. It says current period 12/2013. If it had any other period there, it would say period begin, period close in the button at the bottom. But because this is the 12th period, it's going to do, it changes itself automatically to say begin year end close. So if a year-end close takes place, balance forward amounts are calculated for those projects, and their balance forward switch on, and summary records are written for the new year. So that's the case with most folks. Okay, prior to the closing process, make sure you review the project maintenance records for open projects. Close or inactivate any projects that should no longer be having transactions in them. Check to make sure any open projects that should have their balances carried forward are checked off. Balance forward at year end, options checked. Projects that span multiple fiscal years should have this checkbox selected. If the year is closed and projects were not marked as balance forward, you can correct that. What you would do is go to the Project Controller setup screen, set the period back to the last period of the previous year. This is after you've marked the appropriate ones as balance forward that may not have been before, and then rerun the year-end closing process. And that'll get everything back into line. Fiscal period maintenance, if you're using those, make sure you've got those set up for the new year. Also, your week maintenance. Need to make sure that your week maintenance is set up to the week ending dates for the new year, so that when folks go to put their time cards in the first week of the year, they'll be good to go. Okay. Last thing on the list is going to be payroll. But let me take a look at the console here, see if I've got any questions. Okay, don't see any questions. So on to payroll.
Mike?
Yes.
Hi, it's Michelle. There actually are some questions in the question pane.
I can't see the question pane.
Oh, okay. I can go ahead and tell you what some of the questions are.
Okay, great.
One of them says this is the 2014 SL year end with 2015 dates for W-2s. Is this information still relevant for 2015 with 2015 W-2 dates?
Yes.
Okay, and then also, do we have to do a year-end install each year?
Some years yes, some years no. There was actually a period of time when we went, I don't know, 4 or 5 years when there was no changes required. But lately, it's been more frequent. So this year, there are changes to the 1099. So you will have to put this update on to do your 1099s. Any other questions, Michelle?
Yes. What would be a reason to run the rebuild 1099 process?
The best reason I could think of is that you went in and adjusted the numbers and somehow things didn't work out very well and you want to start over, would be the main reason why you would do that.
And then the other question was, will the website for the update be available again?
Will the website for the update be available? I'm not sure I understand the question. It's available now, and it will be available.
Okay, well, hopefully that answered the questions in the. She just said I just need that information again. So we will be sending that information out after this webinar.
Oh, we're going to send everybody this PowerPoint.
Yes, yes.
Oh, yes.
So I think that's just what she was clarifying. So yes, that's all the questions I saw in the question pane.
Okay, good enough. I will move on to the payroll section. Okay, payroll year-end. First, close the year for payroll before you install the year-end updates. Of course, you would reconcile the 941's unemployment reports and usually print the W-2s to plain paper for review. Edit the W-2 data in employee W-2 history screen in initialize mode. So similar to I mentioned about accounts payable, utilize initialize mode. Again, rights have to be granted for initialize mode in order to use it. Of course, then you would print your W-2s or do your magnetic media file. Okay, Fed 9, additional Medicare deduction. So if you're using payroll, please make a note of this. What you're going to see on these screenshots is the way that Fed 9 should be set up in your system for the new year. A couple of things to note, it's based on gross earnings. Calculation method is a fixed percentage. It would be subject to all work locations. It is an employee deduction. And here in the W-2 control, box number 06, additional Medicare tax would have to be enabled there. Exemptions and credits, so this would be set up such that the base deduction is Fed 6, and that that the exemption type is Fed 6. The annual maximum there, I believe, is correct, but I'm not 100% sure about that. Okay, so as far as the steps for the closing goes, you need to, of course, confirm all the data for 2015 has been entered and processed, review the payroll batch register, make sure that all batches have been released and posted. Again, no batches on hold, released later, or suspended. Print period end reports, 941 quarterly tax worksheet, unemployment tax worksheet, earnings and deductions report. So payroll will be closed with the year option in general ledger closing. It won't let you do it any other way. Years ago it did. But so regardless of what your fiscal is, or if you're on a calendar year, you'll be doing a year closing in payroll for December. When you go through that closing process, new deduction records are created for the new year in the deduction table. Make sure that you clear all calculations in payroll before closing the year. That can cause an error in the following year, so make sure all calculations have been completed. So closing the payroll is a matter of going to the payroll near the bottom there. Notice it says year, so that's in December. It would be the year regardless of your fiscal year. Okay, for processing W-2s. Apply the year-end updates. That's what we talked about at the very beginning. That's that year-end update from Microsoft. It's coming out right before Christmas. Calculate the W-2s, review the data, edit and correct if needed. So if you find an error, you go back and correct the data, and then rerun the W-2 calculation. When it's correct, of course, print the W-2 forms or generate the magnetic media. Calculating W-2. So open W-2 calculation, choose current W-2 year, select the pay groups that you want to calculate for, and hit begin processing. So that'll go out and calculate it and prepare you for printing. You can print the W-2 forms to blank paper to review. Plain paper copy is commonly done by folks. Use the employee W-2 history to verify in individual employees for reconciliation. Okay, if there are issues, determine the cause of the problem. If the federal wages are incorrect, you need to identify earnings types that are set up incorrectly, identify any missing exemptions, fix setup as required, and then recalculate. State wages. Again, identify any earnings types that are set up incorrectly, identify any missing exemptions, same thing. In this case, use initialize mode to correct the year-to-date subject wages in the history so they are correct, and then recalculate W-2s. Also, you can use the initialize mode to correct the state wages in employee W-2 history and do not recalculate W-2s. Excuse me one second. Pardon me, I had to sneeze there. Okay, if the tax amount is incorrect, you need to determine the cause. Is it due to the federal, state, or local? And then initialize the tax amount to be correct, to the correct tax amount. A couple of notes. The key to correct setup issues is to avoid problems in the following year, right? So you want to make sure that you get it all taken care of. Use caution when using initialize mode to modify employee history. It's not something that you'll be able to back off of once you do it and save it. Okay, the W-2 calculation can be run at any time. You can run it multiple times. Inactive employees will be included in specific box numbers W-2 control tab and earnings maintenance or deduction maintenance. Protect edited W-2 information in W-2 calculation, right? That's a setting. Missing state employer ID, deduction maintenance, W-2 control tab, these are all things to check. Missing federal employer ID, make sure that's in the company maintenance correctly. W-2 forms. So Microsoft does not have a copy 1 or copy 2 report. Use copy D instead. D is in Delta. Microsoft uses a standard 2-part W-2 form. There's also a 4-part or 4-up form in SL 2011. This is where you can get pre-printed forms. Actually, at this same location, you can get either 1099s or W-2s, or indeed checks and invoice, things like that as well. You can print your own forms using the copy D formats. Copy A for W-2 forms must be printed in a red scannable 2-up format ink, if you choose to do that. Or if you're doing magnetic media reporting, you need to populate the required fields in the screen for running that. Get the calendar year in there. You can change the file path to wherever you would like the file to be located that you'll upload to the government. Of course, you have to have your transmitter PIN number in there and your contact information. The company ID fields default from the company maintenance, but can be overridden. Sending the file to Social Security, follow instructions provided by Social Security. The file format is, if you want to check it, you can use the free AccuWage program to take a look at that and make sure it's okay before you upload it. And that's all I have about payroll, and that's all we have about year ends. So, Michelle, were there any other questions that came up?
Mike, I didn't see any new ones in the question panel, but I believe Marion's going to unmute everyone so that they can ask questions. Is that correct, Marion?
I can do that right now.
So the lines are open. Are there any questions?
Does anyone have any questions?
Okay, so you for Bill a while back, right? And you did it.
Now, in order to ask a question, I believe you did have to put in your audio PIN. So if you can't get through, please feel free just to put a question in the question or chat box. It doesn't look like we have any questions. So, okay.
Oh, Marion?
Yeah?
Hi, I do see one in the question pane. It says, we don't run payroll, but we do use the vacation reports accrual. Is there anything special we need to do? Did you hear that, Mike?
Is there an option for you to change, like, on the top right side, where it says on behalf of? Are you able to change that name to this next person's name? Okay.
Muted. Unmuted.
Which is
Okay.
yeah, I'm not sure why, but our IT department.
Oh, okay. So I muted everyone again. It seemed like we had some background noise going on there.
Marion?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm not sure, Mike, if you heard the question that did come through. It's, we don't run payroll, but we do use a vacation reports accrual. Is there anything special we need to do?
Maybe we've lost Mike there. We'll include that the answer to that question when we send information out. And everyone, we will be sending out this slide deck, and you'll also be able to have access to the presentation because we did record the session. So we're going to stop recording, and everyone, we appreciate you attending today. If you have any questions, please reach out to Michelle or myself. And hope you have a successful close and a wonderful holiday season. And that'll be it for today. Thank you.